Welcome back. Part 3 of Eco 501, sections 1 and 2, week 5. In this part, we will be looking at we will be looking at part 4 and 5 that we mentioned in the first part of our video, that what is costs in economics, how are costs viewed, and what do the cost curves look like. So let's go back, let's go down. Now, cost analysis in economics. Okay, it's what does cost mean? If you have done accounting sciences, then accountants calculate costs very simply. How much money is coming out of my pocket, i.e., all the costs that I can see with my eyes. This is known as explicit costs in accounting sciences. So what economics does, economics calculates these accounting costs, the explicit costs, and it also calculates the opportunity cost of investments, spending money. Why? Because whenever we make a decision, there's an opportunity cost involved in it. So economics is a science of decision making. Thus, economic cost means financial cost plus opportunity cost of a decision. Now, some of you who have done accounting sciences will say, why? Hey, hold on. Accounting sciences also has the concept of opportunity cost. Yes, they do. They call it implicit costs. So basically what happens in accounting science, the costs are calculated as explicit and implicit costs. In economics, we calculate them as accounting costs and opportunity costs. Now, let's say I want to purchase a car for say 30 lakh taka. What was the next best alternative relative to what I could have spent on this car? The answer to that is 1,001 options could have been the second best. Because the second best to me will not be the same to you. It's a relative answer. So if we want to model it and standardize it, then what happens is the second best alternative has to have a universal appeal. How does it have the universal appeal? The next best alternative of BD 30 lakhs will be, if I didn't spend the money, how much interest would this money earn in 1 year from an risk-free bond? What is a risk-free bond? A risk-free bond is that if the person to whom I give the money guarantees me that it will earn 10% interest at the end of the year, this debt will be honored, come what may. Such a debt can only be honored if we buy government bonds, because the government is a very effective guarantor that, okay, this is the amount of money that we will be earning. Okay, so the next best alternative of BD 30 lakh taka will be the interest it will earn in 1 year from a risk-free bond. And risk-free bonds are usually government bonds. Why? Because they are guaranteed by the state. Finally, we come to the concept of sunk costs. Now, once the decision has been made to buy the car, okay, the money is gone. The philosophical implication of this was that the sunk costs are we do not consider in decision making because they have been taken in the past. Okay, so we omit the sunk costs. Now, economics assumes sunk costs because sunk costs do not influence the decision, but behaviorally it can. We have also discussed this in the previous weeks. Now, what's the conclusion in this particular part? That costs can be measured in different ways, financial and economic. Financial costs are not always relevant to decision making, because in economics, we look at decision making on the basis of opportunity costs. Okay, in theory at least, some costs do not affect decision making, because the best decision was taken at the time. Now we go to part 5, costs in graphs. Again, we're looking at short-run costs. We start with the concepts of total costs, then we go for per unit costs. Total costs are divided into two components: total fixed cost, total variable cost. As the two names suggest, fixed cost is fixed no matter how many units of output we produce. Fixed costs are therefore independent of the level of output we decide to produce. Variable costs, as the name suggests, will vary as the output changes. Okay. Now, if the fixed cost is fixed at all levels of output, then total fixed cost curve has to be a straight line parallel to the output axis, which is the horizontal axis. Total variable costs will vary with output, as we just said. The more the output, the more the variable cost. This is also known as operating costs in accounting science. Why? The more we produce, the more operating costs we incur. So what we have is total cost is equal to total fixed cost plus total variable cost. Total fixed cost will always be greater than zero. So total cost is always greater than total variable cost. This is the mathematical relationship, but we want to visualize this relationship. If we want to visualize this relationship, what happens is when we say total cost is greater than total variable cost, graphically, total cost will always be above total variable cost, whatever the levels of output. What is the difference between the two functions mathematically? The fixed cost. So graphically, we have to show that the two functions are parallel to each other, the gap being the fixed cost. This we can see in figure 8.1, page number 288. Total cost is TTC over here. This is the fixed cost, which we said is say 150 in this particular example. No matter how many outputs, levels of output we decide to produce, our fixed cost is 150 for all levels of output. Total cost is always above total variable cost because total cost is greater than total variable cost. What's the gap between them? The gap is the total fixed cost between them. Now, they're parallel to each other because the fixed cost is the same, no matter what the level of output. What we are interested in here is, before we get into the per unit cost analysis, is look at the shape of the total cost curve. Initially, it's becoming flatter, then it starts to become steep. Total cost. Initially, it becomes flatter because we are more productive when we are thinking from a production functions point of view. We reach a peak, then we become less productive. So the total cost starts to become steeper and steeper. The same parallel thing is observed with the total variable cost curve over here. Excuse me. Now, the next analysis is the average cost curves or the marginal cost curves, or we call them per unit cost curves. Average fixed cost, as the name suggests, okay, is related to our total divided by output. Total fixed cost, sorry, total fixed cost, here it is. Total fixed cost divided by total output. And average fixed cost will be what? Fixed cost is fixed, but average fixed cost, as output increases, the ratio starts to become smaller. So that will become a rectangular hyperbola. We'll see in the graph right now. Okay. And then we have the concept of marginal cost. Okay. Marginal cost is the incremental cost That's also the average that we look at in a particular between two particular units. Okay, and that is our GP. Now, all this mathematics we will be discussing in the discussion class, because I think it's better we discuss on a one-to-one basis. But this is what we want to see. Figure 8.2. What is it showing? Marginal cost is the change that happens first. Why? It's a marginal average. Marginal average. The average between two particular units. When marginal cost starts to increase, average cost also starts to increase. Okay, average total cost is above average variable cost. Same concept, because total cost is greater than average variable cost. When marginal cost is falling, these two are also falling. Okay, now with the production function, we said marginal productivity reaches its peak first, average productivity reaches its peak 1 unit after the marginal productivity peak. Cost curves are not inverted U curves, they are U curves. Why? Initially, when we are productive, our cost functions must be very good. Once we reach our capacity or our peak in our economic activity, and we carry on doing more output, then the cost becomes steeper. This was exhibited in this curve over here. Initially, the output is flat, then it starts to become steep. Initially, the output is flat, it starts to become steep. Where is the minimum of the marginal cost curve? Over here. Where is the minimum of the average total cost curve? One period later. Where is the minimum of the average variable cost? After the minimum of the marginal cost curve. And over here, what we wanted to show is, on the left part, we have marginal cost is less than average variable cost. What does that mean? That in order to produce an extra unit of output, our additional cost is less than our total average cost. We have an incentive to produce that extra output. In the right part, we have, oh, sorry. In the right part, we have marginal cost is greater than average variable cost. Cost is not something that we like. So if we find that the marginal cost is greater than the average variable cost, we don't have an incentive to produce that extra output. In the left part, when we had marginal cost is less than average variable cost, then we had an incentive to produce the output. And marginal minimum or marginal maximum always happens first, because that is the change that happens first. That change influences the average change. Now we come to our last part, which is the concluding thoughts. This is week 5. Our midterm will be either in week 6 or week 7, depending on what your program instructs us to do. So at the end of the class discussion, what we will decide on is a second class assessment. How do we do this second class assessment? Will it be an assignment or will it be a viva? We'll discuss this during the class, and then we shall have 2 assessments before the midterm. Before the final, I will definitely therefore try to have at least 1 more assessment. So in all, we will have 3 assessments at least. I will calculate the best 2 of the 3. If we have 4 assessments, class assessments, I will calculate them best 3 or 4. So this brings us to the concluding part of week 5 pre-recorded lectures. So hope to see you all during the discussion class. If you have any problems or queries, please note them down. We'll discuss them in detail during the class. Okay then, bye, and thanks for watching. Bye.